I know you already saw me if you were watching the stream earlier, but welcome. Hello, everyone. Turn myself down a little bit because that's loud. Welcome to Flamesnation Live. And we got a lot to talk about coming out of a 3-0 win over the Toronto Maple Leafs on Monday night. Pat Steinberg along with you, live from our Sportsnet 960 downtown studio. That was a pretty solid win by the Flames, and give David Rittich a lot of credit for what we saw on Monday night. The Flames needed somebody to step up, and somebody indeed stepped up. And I don't know if we would have thought that David Rittich was going to be that guy to step up. Give the guy a ton of credit because he was great. Best player on the ice on Monday. And there go the number one team in the NHL, the highest scoring team in the NHL, and they can't score. And that's kind of about as good as you could have hoped for if you're the Flames on Monday night, especially knowing what the narrative was surrounding this team. I just think for the time being, and I think even for temporarily, the ability to maybe tone down the rhetoric a little, maybe tone down or turn down the volume a little, that was really important and good that the Flames were able to do that. Now they got to do it for more than one game, but it certainly was a good start, and the option exists at least now for the Flames to get on some sort of a roll if they can use Monday night as a springboard. Welcome to Flames Nation Live. It's Steinberg with you. We're live in our Sportsnet 960 downtown studios. Who was in first today? Zach was in all the way back at the very beginning. Noah was in close. Jeff and Sam and Jesse. Hopefully everybody is doing well on this Monday night. Let's dive right into the comments before I get to the one topic that I wanted to hit on. It's not even a topic, but just, kind of what I'm thinking about this team right now. This from Zach. Pat, what and who did you like about last night's game? Did you think it was a full 60-minute effort? Lastly, why call up Godin and play him sub 3 minutes? Well, I kind of got the Godin thing last night. I wasn't as... It was a little harder to understand why Godin only played 6:40 or whatever it was on Saturday. Like when you're in a 7-1, 6-1 game like that, you thought maybe that was an opportunity in the latter stages to get Godin some more ice time. So I was a little surprised at that. But in a game like last night's where it could have turned on a dime at any point, knowing how good and how explosive that Maple Leafs team is, the fact that Godin only played 2:10 or whatever it was, yeah, it was a little bit more understandable. I understand shortening the bench in a situation like that. I'd like to see a little bit more of Godin, don't get me wrong, but I understood it kind of in the context of last night's game. Who did I like last night? Well, obviously Rittich. I thought Monahan had his maybe best game of the season. Was really good to see Monahan come back and play like that after missing 2 games with a lower body injury. So that Monahan was really good. Thought Tkachuk had his best game in a little while. That was really important. I like Gaudreau. I thought Gaudreau played really well last night. So those were some of the players that I thought jumped off the page to me yesterday. I still thought it could have gotten away on them. That's how good the Maple Leafs are. But that's one of the things that or some of the things that I liked from last night. Jesse asked, did they play great or did the Leafs just not show up? Rittich needs to start a few in a row. Well, I think he's going to start a few in a row. I don't get the impression that Markstrom is going to be back right away. Now, who knows? These things change, so that could be proven wrong. Who knows? But that kind of seems to be the feel right now, is that it doesn't sound like he's going to be back right away. Not long term, not injured long term, but also not ready to return like tomorrow or Thursday. So it might be a run of a few games here for Rittich, so that'll be interesting to watch. But I also don't think we're talking about anything major for Jacob Markstrom. But I don't know, just be expected to see a little bit more, or expecting rather to see a little bit more of David Rittich here over the next week or so, because I think he's going to get some starts. And if he plays the way he played on Friday and the way he played on Monday, then I think you're pretty happy if you're the Flames. So a couple people wondering whether or not last night is going to be a turning point game for the Flames. Well, that is still to be determined. Because here's, and this goes to kind of what I wrote about for today on flamesnation.ca, and that is last night was a start, and last night was very good and good to see. But you need to see that more than just once or once in a while. And you need to see them play like that, start on time like that, play with a lead like they did last night, that type of stuff. They need to do that on a regular basis. They need to do that more often than not, as opposed to we're really liking it when we see it, but it's kind of surprising when you see it, which has kind of been the case so far this season. So I think that is something that we are going to need to see going forward. But could it be a turning point? Yeah, it could be a turning point if they turn it into one. What's really interesting and what I think is really fascinating is whether or not the Flames are able to use the coming games against Ottawa as a potential springboard. It's less about Toronto for me. I mean, they might play well tomorrow. They might win tomorrow. I think go out, play well, see what happens, put your cards on the table. Maybe the Leafs beat you, maybe they don't. But those 4 straight games against Ottawa and 5 of 6 against Ottawa, think about the confidence they could gain. Think about the role they could go on. Think about the size of the snowball that could start to grow if they have, like they got 6 games or 5 games against Ottawa out of 6. Say they take 8 of 10 possible points against Ottawa. Well, now you're talking about things really starting to tumble in a good way. Now you're talking about things really starting to get on a roll. So that, to me, is the biggest key for this springboard. Play well against Toronto. See how that plays. Getting 2 against Toronto would be huge. But then you got to make those games against Ottawa really count, and you got to use those to really get yourself on a roll, both in the standings and with the way they're playing on the ice, get in a bit of a roll. So that's kind of what I'm interested in. And we'll see if that ends up happening. We'll see if they're able to do that. Lots of different comments coming in. Sometimes hard to keep up with everything. Vance says there has to be something wrong in the locker room. Doesn't make any sense that they are so inconsistent. And you know what? Maybe not. Maybe we are talking about a group that has had some inconsistencies. Maybe we are talking about something that has, I can see how you might think that. It's kind of on the Flames to prove us wrong in that regard. It's kind of on the Flames to determine that isn't the case, and we'll see if they can. This is a real swing point in the season. That's why I wrote that. If the Flames want to swing their season, well, it's got to happen now. And one game against Toronto is great and could be a nice start, but it's got to be a start. It's got to be something that continues and not. So this is going to go a long way in determining whether or not some of the rumor and innuendo that's out there surrounding this team is accurate or not, or whether this is just a bad start or a bad 19-20 games, and if they can really turn this season into something. They are behind the 8 ball. They are the number 5 team in the conference by both points and point percentage. They're not out of reach. They've still got 7 against Edmonton, who is directly in front of them. They've still got, 7 against Montreal, who's in front of them. They've got less against Winnipeg. I think they've only got 3 left with Winnipeg now, or 4 left with Winnipeg. But they've got an opportunity. That's the beauty about this division, is that you're never completely out of reach unless you're Ottawa, and Vancouver's starting to get there. But for Calgary, you're not out of reach, but you got to turn it, and now is the time to swing it. There is no doubt about that if you're the Flames. What else we got here? Shane says glad Ottawa's winning in terms of points. Going to be interesting how Flames play against Ottawa. Can they turn it into a scenario where they really bear down and kind of impose on the Senators. The Sens are where they are in the standings for a reason, but they're also starting to play better. They're also getting some saves from Matt Murray. And, they're starting to be a little bit of a more difficult out for some of these teams that were just trouncing all over them in the early stages of the season. So you hope that the Flames don't get into a spot where they overlook the Sens. You hope that they approach this, and I know it's hard to do sometimes, but you hope that they approach the Senators the same way that they approach the Maple Leafs or approach the Oilers and all that type of stuff. Dallas makes a really interesting point. Says, I'm very curious about that locker room. Are there too many new faces? Perhaps the lines aren't staying together long enough to build that chemistry. It's also a COVID year, so it's an odd one to begin with. So for me, I do think it's time to give lines a run. And they got 60 minutes for the most part last night. Bennett, Monahan, Gaudreau together all night long. Backlund, Lucic, Dubé together all night long. And Lindholm, Mangiapane, and Tkachuk together all night long. And that's a good start. I think the constant line blender, I partially understand it because you've been trying to find your game as a team. The coaching staff has been trying to find a groove. But now you're getting into game 20 of a 56-game season. Like, we're not all that far off from the halfway mark here. By the end of February, we'll be closing right in on the halfway mark. So I do think now is the time to maybe get into a groove where you hope it's a little bit more set it and forget it when it comes to your lines. And you hope it's a little bit more of a just carbon copy. You make your tweaks here and there. But the best teams in the NHL, their top 9 is pretty set. Their top 9, you pretty much roll out the same way every single night. Toronto had to make changes last night because they had injuries. Obviously, injuries play into it. You run into a dry spell where your team's not playing very well, you make changes. But by and large, the best teams in this league go for 15, 20 games in a row with essentially the same line combinations, the same key line combinations. And that's where I think the Flames need to get to. And I think they've got an opportunity here to do that for a little bit. We'll see if they do. In-game juggling is a little less of a thing than it is game-to-game juggling. But even still, last night they were able to because of the way they played and because they were consistent throughout a game. Even though the Maple Leafs could have swung that game. Rittich lets in a goal and maybe it's a different thing, but that doesn't happen. That was a good team win last night, and they didn't have to juggle up the lines. You're hoping that is what we see. I do think there's been a few times this year where maybe the coaching staff has, I feel like anyway, on the outside, been a little jumpy in a game. Like, I'm trying to remember which one it was. Take a sip of water to remember. I'm trying to remember if it was a game recently, and I don't remember if it might have, you know what it was? I think it was the first period against the Oilers at home Friday night. And they lose that game 2-1, but I didn't think the Flames played a poor first period, but they were down 1-0 on the Puljujarvi goal, and then second period the lines were juggled up. Like, I thought that was a time where you could have stuck with the lines. They didn't play a bad first period. They're only down by 1. Now, I get it. I'm not a coach. I'm not paid to feel the game the way the coaching staff is, but from the outside, it felt like that was maybe a little jumpy or a little premature. So, you're hoping that their consistency in game and game to game gets a little better, so we see less and less of that as we continue. Bruce says would like to see Bennett stay with Monahan and Gaudreau long term this season, and not here and there now and then. I think that's probably what we're going to be talking about, and for the next little bit, I think that's probably what they would like to have. So far, Bennett's been the best guy that's played with them. So far, Bennett has been the best fit on that line. I think there's a decent chance of that happening. Christopher says, Pat, can you tell these people Luke Schenn doesn't solve problems here? I have been seeing a lot of Luke Schenn talking about waivers and stuff like that. I don't know if any of the guys on waivers today do much. I don't think Luke Schenn, I thought Shillington was fine last night. I think that your third pairing, has it been as good of late? No, but I still think Valimaki has been by and large pretty good. He's had some rough games here and there. He's a rookie defenseman. That's going to happen, but by and large, I think Valimaki's been really good this year. If you were to go with Nesterov and Shillington as a rotation a little bit, I think you're okay with that. It's still the third pairing. And I don't think, here's what I will say, I don't think Luke Schenn is an upgrade on anybody on the third pairing right now. That would be my opinion on that. Somebody asking about why Nordstrom continues to remain in the lineup. The plus-minus isn't great on Nordstrom. They like him as a penalty killer. I'd be interested myself. Like, I think he's been okay as a penalty killer. I think the forward pairing, him and Lindholm on the PK, has been okay. And then I believe it's Mangiapane and Backlund is the next PK unit. I'd be interested maybe seeing, maybe you bump up Mangiapane with Lindholm and make that your top penalty killing unit, and maybe you can go Backlund and somebody else. Maybe even it's Backlund and Nordstrom. I don't know. But I'd be interested in seeing somebody else as kind of the top, one of the top PK forwards. I know they like Nordstrom as a penalty killer, but I do think sometimes that has made it so that he's been in the lineup on games where 5-on-5 he hasn't been as great. I felt like he's been a little better of late. But yeah, he has not been great this year. And again, as we've talked about many times here, the depth signings, the Levo, Simone, and Nordstrom signings to this point have not worked out the way that you hoped. I still feel like Levo is close and around it and is knocking on the door. I still feel like there's something there with Levo, and I think if he gets one, he might be able to break through, but it still hasn't happened yet, and it needs to happen. Simone's barely been in the lineup. We'll see. I don't know. If we're going to be talking about a lot of lineup changes tomorrow, I think you're probably going to be talking about Rittich as your starting goaltender tonight. Tomorrow night rather. Wouldn't be a surprise if we're talking about the same lineup for the most part on Wednesday night. And as Jefferson said, they did have Bennett on the PK for a little bit last night. Only about 54 seconds. That's because they took so many penalties last night. When you're shorthanded 7 times, you have to cycle in some different PK forwards, or else you're just gonna, like, Lindholm played 27 plus last night. You gotta give him a break because he's so huge for you on the power play. He's so huge for you at 5-on-5. If you're also hammering him with penalty kill time like that, at some point you got to get somebody else in there. And I feel like it could be, Lindholm is such a good penalty killer. I know you don't want to take him off of that, but sometimes you might want to see if there are other options. And actually, I think that maybe using Bennett a little bit on the PK last night was good and important. A little earlier, last topic today, somebody asking, a number of people asking or talking about Jack Eichel. It's hard to talk and read all the comments at the same time, but the Jack Eichel conversation is fascinating. First of all, I would be skeptical that he gets traded in season. I think that the Eichel conversation, my guess would be if he gets traded out of Buffalo, which seems more and more likely. Like, I feel for the Sabres because, boy, did they get hammered with COVID, and in a bad way they got hammered by COVID. So I feel for them a lot, but at the same time, they're below 500 again. Eichel already has made it very clear that he wants to be in the playoffs, wants to be on a good team. If they miss this year, which is trending that way once again, I would be shocked at this point if Eichel is back in Buffalo in October. And yes, absolutely the Flames should be all in on Jack Eichel, as should any team that is not a Stanley Cup contender right now. And the Flames are not a Stanley Cup contender right now, 100%. I would trade, and this is me. I think I might get some pushback from this on the roster, or rather on the chat. I would trade anybody on the Flames roster, or include anybody on the Flames roster in a trade for Jack Eichel. Obviously, different packages depending on which player. But if Eichel is in the mix, and the Flames are actually in the mix to get him, there's no untouchables. Zero. Jack Eichel is an elite NHL #1 center. Top 6 or 7 center in this league who, in an 82-game season, scores 80 to 90 points in his sleeve. Jack Eichel is the #1 center, the elite #1 center that this team hasn't had since Nieuwendyk. And I think Lindholm is doing a hell of a job, and I think if you continue to use him as your #1 center, you can be okay if you're the Flames. But he's not Eichel. Very few players are Eichel. It's going to cost you an arm and a leg to get him, but I still think you should be all in on it. And again, nobody would be untouchable in that case because I believe Eichel is better than every player on the Flames roster. That's not a knock on any of the guys, but Jack Eichel is a top 10, 15 player in the NHL. So, yeah. And obviously, different trades, and I'm not saying that you trade for potentially elite players for him. All I'm saying is that if you could work a trade that is fair market value, I wouldn't have any untouchables on the roster. And that includes Tkachuk, that includes Gaudreau, that really includes anybody on the roster. That's how good Eichel would be. Now, Eichel is going to be a extremely expensive player to get if he does end up getting traded, and on top of that, he's going to be extremely sought after. But yes, should they be in on him? Of course they should be. Any middle-of-the-pack or non-Stanley Cup contending team should be in on Eichel, and even then, I bet Vegas will be in on him. And they'll probably get him. Apparently, Vegas gets everybody. Anyway, hopefully everybody is surviving in the snow. Hopefully everybody is staying safe, and we will talk to you on Friday with Pike. We got 2 games, Wednesday in Toronto, Thursday in Ottawa. Can the Flames get back above 500? We'll find out tomorrow in Toronto. Join us tomorrow, 4 o'clock on Sportsnet 960, The Fan, for Calgary Flames warm-up, 5 o'clock for Puck Drop. Of course, we've got every game for you on the radio. The big show every day from 1 till 5, of course. It is abbreviated tomorrow. Lots happening at flamesnation.ca as well. Join Pike and I here on Flames Nation Live on Friday. Until then, be safe. Be kind to one another. We will talk to you in a couple of days. It's been another edition of Flames Nation Live. Thank you so much, everybody.